Today, Walmart's earnings beating estimates, store sales boosted by consumers spending stimulus checks, and new services added during the pandemic. Scammers are now targeting crypto investors. Reports of scams are up more than 10 times from last year. How are they tricking people? And are your solar panels made with forced labor in China? A new report says it's very possible. That and much more, coming up at NTD Business. Good evening. Great to have you with us. Lots of strong retailer earnings out today. Walmart is benefiting from strong grocery and e-commerce sales, beating analyst revenue estimates by several $billions. NTD's Melina Wisecup takes a look.
Walmart, yet another company beating analyst estimates for the quarter, making $138 billion in revenue. That's about $6 billion more than expected.
In the U.S., economic stimulus is clearly having an impact. But we also see encouraging signs that our customers want to get out and shop. Our execution is improving despite the hurdles presented by the pandemic.
Foot traffic analyst company Placer.ai can confirm. Though people are spending less time in Walmart, they are visiting more often, and the company's been relatively resilient to the pandemic.
They provide this single location where you can get a lot done. And they've expanded that out with things like Walmart Plus or diving deeper into pharmacy. But then they also are able to do so while focusing on value.
Walmart actually made more in 2020 than in the previous year. One reason is that though people shopped less, they spent more on each visit.
They're so strong within the retail space that they're able to thrive no matter the situation. It's just the type of shopping behavior that changes as opposed to seeing success or failure.
Q1 results were so good that it raised its earnings projections, now expecting consolidated operating income to increase by high single digits, previously expecting it to remain flat. Melina Wisecup, NTD News.
And Macy swings back to profit. Its net income and revenue both beating expectations. It's also boosted guidance for all of 2021. The company says government stimulus checks and vaccine rollouts help business. Products popular during the pandemic, like home goods, continue to do well. The CEO says customers are starting to socialize more too, so special occasion items like prom dresses are also doing well. Just as luggage sales, people also traveling, also improving there. Macy's has pushed most of its sales online. It expects digital sales to reach $10 billion in the next 3 years, but says where there's a physical Macy's store, online sales are 2 to 3 times higher. Another company that surpassed expectations. No wonder Lance Roberts says analysts set a low bar. Home Depot had a strong first quarter and expects the good times to last. The company sold more than 30% more than the same period 2 years ago. NTD's Evelyn Lee has the details.
Home Depot reported a 31% jump in quarterly same-store sales in its earnings report Tuesday. That's bigger than expected, and it relieved concerns that business might be slowing down.
All of our top 40 markets posted double-digit comps, while Canada posted comps above the company average, and Mexico posted double-digit comps.
Home Depot was classified as an essential retailer, and sales surged during the pandemic, especially when stuck-at-home Americans spent more time upgrading their living spaces. Then, Home Depot benefited from contractors rushing back to stores to get through a backlog of projects put on pause. The company also benefited from consumers' confidence in the strength of the U.S. housing market. Existing house prices surged, and home building jumped to a 15-year high in March. Neil Saunders, managing director of Global Data, says Home Depot hasn't reached its peak yet. He says another round of government stimulus was the icing on the cake for the quarter. And Home Depot CEO is positive about the future.
Housing remains strong. Homeowners' balance sheets are healthy. And our customers continue to tell us that they are planning on spending on a variety of home improvement projects.
But data expert Saunders warns this level of growth is unlikely to repeat in the second quarter. He sees a shift in consumer spending to other activities such as travel. Evelyn Lee, NTD News.
And Amazon could be about to buy Hollywood's MGM studio, according to reports by The Information. MGM is the studio behind the James Bond movies and other legendary films. It also owns the Epix cable channel, makes popular TV shows including The Handmaid's Tale and Fargo. Amazon declined to comment on the report, But the latest news comes after AT&T said it would combine its Warner Media business with Discovery. That would create a big new player in streaming and put rivals like Amazon under pressure to level up. And Bank of America is raising the minimum wage for its employees. The bank said today it will raise its hourly minimum wage to $25 an hour by 2025. The CEO says it will cost hundreds of millions of dollars per year, but hopes the policy will increase loyalty and that will pay shareholders back in the long term. Bank of America already pays its employees at least $20 per hour. And interestingly, it says it will also require all of its vendors and suppliers to pay employees at least $15 an hour. That impacts about 43,000 employees at more than 2,000 vendors, although B of A points out that 99% of its vendors already meet the threshold. And a federal agency says crypto scams are on the rise, with con artists posing as celebrities like Elon Musk. They're tricking people with fake investment opportunities. NTD's Lena Wisecup explains.
Scammers are cashing in on the crypto frenzy and baiting people with fake investment opportunities to steal their money. The Federal Trade Commission says crypto investment scams spiked over the past year. Nearly 7,000 people reported losses of more than $80 million since October. That's about 12 times the number of reports from the same time a year earlier. The FTC says in one type of scam, fraudsters pose as celebrities and tell people if they give this celebrity a certain amount of crypto, they'll get more back. But instead, the scammers just pocket the money. Just to scammers impersonating Tesla CEO Elon Musk alone, consumers have lost more than $2 million in crypto over the past 6 months. People in their 20s and 30s were the biggest victims. They lost more money on investment in crypto fraud than any other type of scam. Older people over 50 were less likely to report falling for the scams, but when they did, they lost more. The FTC says scammers also impersonate government authorities or a potential romantic partner. Melina Wisecup, NTD News.
You can find out how to protect yourself against crypto scams at ftc.gov/cryptocurrency. And stocks ended lower today. The Dow falling 267 points, 0.78%. S&P 500 lost 35 points, 0.85%. The Nasdaq dropped 75 points, or 0.56%. The indexes were weighed down by telecom stocks, including AT&T. It fell nearly 6%. Weak housing data also weighed down. More on the housing numbers in just a moment. Crude oil prices fell, Treasury yields held steady, and tomorrow, investors will be analyzing the Fed's April minutes for any sign it'll dial back monetary support due to inflation. We'll see. U.S. home building slowed more than expected in April, likely pulled down by soaring prices for lumber and other materials. Construction for single-family homes fell the most. The number of houses authorized to be built but not yet started rose to its highest level in over 2 decades. This could mean builders are hesitant or have difficulty starting construction. Another survey suggests businesses in the construction industry are having trouble finding and keeping workers. Some companies say they'd build more if they had the labor. And President Biden visited a Ford plant today, making his case for a $170 billion electric vehicle plan. He says the investment is needed for the U.S. to lead the industry. NTD's Christina Kim brings us more.
President Biden pitched his $174 billion electric vehicle plan in Michigan Tuesday.
The future of the auto industry is electric. There's no turning back.
At the Ford electric vehicle plant in Dearborn, Michigan, Biden called for the United States to lead the world in electric vehicle manufacturing, infrastructure, deployment, and innovation.
How the future is going to be made, but it's going to be made here in America. Made in America.
Biden made the case for government grants, tax credits, and consumer incentives to lower electric vehicle manufacturing costs and support market demand. He proposed point-of-sale incentives to encourage Americans to buy electric cars, although the incentives will not apply to expensive luxury models. Biden is also seeking to put more charging stations around the country. The goal is to build a national network of 500,000 of them by 2030. There are now around 100,000 in the United States. His plan also calls for low-cost loans to companies that produce clean energy vehicles in the United States. Biden faces resistance from many congressional Republicans on his electric vehicle focus. Christina Kim, NTD News.
And Republicans are getting ready to unveil their new infrastructure counter-proposal early this week. is expected to cost over $500 billion to begin with. That sounds like a lot, but it's much smaller than Biden's proposed $2.3 trillion plan. Democrats have criticized the Republican plan, though, as being inadequate, while a bipartisan group of senators has discussed a different package of roughly $1 trillion. Senate Republicans are due to meet with senior officials at the Capitol to discuss it further. And a new report says the Chinese Communist Party uses forced labor to make solar panels. They are then exported around the world. The report alleges ethnic minorities in Western China are made to work against their will. The report says the global demand for solar energy has spurred China to make the panels as cheaply as possible, and that it comes with steep human costs for those at the origin of the supply chain. The report was put up by Sheffield Hallam University in England, and it says it's difficult for companies to avoid using parts produced with forced labor, since it's an effort led by the Chinese regime as a whole, not just individual businesses. Fred Rockerford is an attorney with international law firm Harris Bricken. He says forced labor is involved in every stage of the supply chain, like mining raw materials or producing components. And it's happening all over China, not just in Xinjiang. He says there's plenty of evidence for it, but the Chinese regime won't let anyone in to verify it. I asked Rockerford how people are forced into working exactly.
So in a typical scenario, you might have this farmer taken to a re-education camp. It might be because the authorities have issues with some of the activities that this person has engaged in the past. It might be because of views that they have expressed, whether they're political or religious, or it might be because the authorities simply feel that this person needs to be re-educated, right? And at the end of these re-education programs, one of the pathways going forward is to have them go work in factories or farms. And if you think about it, it actually, I mean, if you put yourself in the shoes of the CCP, if you can sort of adopt their logic as your own, it actually makes a lot of sense. You've already taken the first step at the re-education camp. You've taken this person, you've told them that a lot of their traditional views are wrong. You're telling them that their religious beliefs are problematic and a form of superstition. Now you take it a step further and you say, well, look, now we're going to put all of this theory, we're going to put it to the test in practice. We're going to see if you can actually apply what you've learned at the camp and put it to practical use for the benefit of the economy and the country as a whole.
And for regular Americans or various departments, businesses, etc., who are planning to buy solar panels and planning to import them, is there a way to really know which are being, there's forced labor being used or not really?
Well, there's two aspects to this question. If you're talking about good faith efforts to find out what's happening in Xinjiang, the report that I mentioned that was issued by Sheffield Hallam University is a great place to start. It's full of information. They've done a really good job of collating the information that's available and really offering a guide to companies looking to do business in this sector as to what the risks are. In fact, that's one of the things that really impacted me about this report is just how, if you will, business friendly it is. It really goes to the heart of that matter. How can you make decisions based on information? I do think that there's another perspective here, which has to do with the ethical question of whether companies want to be engaging in or really aiding and abetting the practices that are possibly taking place in Xinjiang, which is a bit of a different question. I mean, I think you can look at it from a very legalistic perspective and identify risks that might be present, and that's certainly important. And I do think that the resources are there, but there's a broader question here for companies, which is even if you could manage the potential legal risks, even if you manage to fly under the radar, if you will, as far as the U.S. government and their efforts to combat this, are we as a company comfortable engaging with companies that are to some degree connected to the abuses that are taking place in Xinjiang. So this is, I think, a bit of a different question altogether.
Fred Rockerford, Harris Bricken. And a House subcommittee looked into China's international lending practices today, specifically for its Belt and Road Initiative. NTD's Patrick Hayden has the details.
On Tuesday, a House subcommittee held a hearing about China's lending practices to foreign countries. An economist testified about his research analysing 100 Chinese loan contracts to 24 countries.
In your paper, you show this non-disclosure chart, which I found very interesting. And the red bars are, of course, after 2013. And 2013 is a seminal year as the Chinese Communist leader Xi began Belt and Road being announced in 2013. And suddenly we have all these non-disclosure arrangements in every aspect of your 100 loans sample.
China can penalise countries that disclose the terms of these contracts, giving China the power to restructure the debtor's payback period. Economist Sebastian Horn says that countries borrowing money from China should change their disclosure laws.
Well, I think the most powerful way in this regard would be to work to the debtor countries and require them to have robust debt disclosure laws in their domestic laws that requires them to publish lending contracts if they themselves take them up as part of the debt disclosure.
China's debt contracts also make China the preferred creditor against other lenders. Republican French Hill says the US should obtain a meaningful debt agreement with the IMF this summer.
China could end up leading us into endless talks with zero results. 30 years of failure to protect intellectual property, and the recent suspension of 8 years of fruitless discussions by Treasury and our allies on transparency of China's export credit market should remind us just how typical and real that danger is.
He says the human rights abuses taking place in China show that they don't deserve more of a voice in the international financial institutions. He says it's about commitments and contributions to multilateral cooperation, which China doesn't meet. Patrick Hayden, NTD News.
And working long hours is apparently killing hundreds of thousands of people a year. According to the World Health Organization, it says the trend is actually worsening during the pandemic. Libby Hogan reports.
Tapping away at the computer keyboard and sitting for hours in the office chair. It's an image familiar to many, but the norm of working long hours is killing hundreds of thousands of people every year. That's according to the World Health Organization, which warned Monday that longer working hours is a worsening trend that may have intensified during the pandemic. In the first global study of deaths associated with longer working hours, around 745,000 people died from stroke and heart disease associated with longer working hours. WHO Technical Officer Frank Pegger explains.
We have some evidence that shows that when countries go into national lockdown, the numbers of hours work increased by about 10%. We also have coming about through the economic crisis and people working home, we have a digitization, right? A sort of massive increase in digitization of work. And digitization of work might actually make it harder to disconnect.
The study, produced by WHO and the International Labour Organization, focused on 15 countries in 2 regions. Data showed that most of the victims were men and were middle-aged or older. People living in Southeast Asia and the Western Pacific region, including China, Japan and Australia, were the most affected. WHO recommended the need for capping work hours to increase worker productivity and protect workers' health.
A UK regulator wants gig economy companies like Uber to consider giving pensions to their workers. This after the Supreme Court decided Uber drivers are workers and not self-employed. NTD's Patrick Hayden has a look.
The pensions regulator says gig economy companies should consider giving pensions to their workers. That's after the Supreme Court ruled Uber should give pensions, sick pay and holiday pay to their workers. The pensions watchdog is currently working closely with Uber. Pensions regulator Chief Executive Charles Council says other gig economy companies should do the same or risk intervention. But former Pensions Minister Sir Steve Webb told The Telegraph the regulator does not have the powers to make firms provide freelancer pensions. He says there needs to be a rule. It is fine the regulator urging businesses to do good things, and I hope they will, but Uber had to be taken to court. He says it's unlikely that companies will offer pensions out of the goodness of their heart, and legislation needs to catch up. Patrick Hayden, NTD News, London.
Still to come this evening. A startup wants to fly you anywhere in the world in just 4 hours. How does it plan to do it? And a company is trying to reduce pandemic waste. It's recycling masks, gowns, and other personal protective equipment into blocks of plastic, and they're using a unique machine to do it. That and more after this short break. Supersonic jets are coming back in style. The European airliner Concorde operated one of only 2 supersonic jets commercially from 1969 to 2003. It was expensive. But now a startup called Boom Supersonic is working to pick up where Concorde left off. They've released a demonstrator aircraft called the XB-1. It's a model for their future commercial airliner that Boom hopes will basically change time. With its fast speeds, Boom says a flight from New York to London would take just 3 hours and 15 minutes. The company is hoping to eventually charge just $100 for a 4-hour trip. Boom is planning to start building the first plane in 2023, start flying it in 2026. And a driverless car in Arizona meets with minor road construction and gets a little confused. A Waymo taxi got stuck at an intersection in Chandler, Arizona. The culprit? Orange cones blocking a street. Passenger Joel Johnson recorded the incident from inside a minivan. Waymo says the car requested help from a remote fleet response specialist. They watch real-time feeds of the fully autonomous vehicles and offer assistance. Unfortunately, the employee provided incorrect guidance and a roadside assistance team had to be called. Once they arrived, the taxi sped away, but but then it ran into more cones. Eventually, the car surrendered to a human driver who was able to complete the trip. And a company in the UK has developed a new way to help the environment. It's recycling PPE waste like masks into new products and reducing pollution. NTD's Andrew Thomas has the story.
Millions of single-use face masks, gowns, and curtains have helped the fight against the pandemic. But the items have also created thousands of tons of waste. One company in Wales says it has the solution: specialist machines that convert used PPE into reusable plastic.
We have a number of trusts now using our machines, and specifically to take out the plastics and also the face masks, which has become a huge problem in the current pandemic.
Face masks go inside the machine for about an hour. What comes out is a 40-pound block of plastic. They're already being reused to make things like toolboxes and new school chairs. It's estimated that over the past 12 months, almost 20 billion disposable masks have been used in the UK alone. But that's still a tiny portion of the 240 million tons of waste the country produces each year. Demand for PPE remains steady, and being able to recycle pandemic waste could provide a long-term solution. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
That's the latest business updates for today. You can still catch NTD Evening News with Stephanie Cox. That's at 6:30 p.m. Eastern. For NTD Business, that's all for today. Thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
We have a new channel. Subscribe to us on YouTube at NTD News. Get the highlights of our news broadcast and the most important headlines that we curate especially for you.
Don't miss out on important news. Our videos are being deleted. So if you don't want to be cut off from honest news, take a moment to sign up for our newsletter at newsletter.ntd.com so you don't lose access to NTD. Go to newsletter.ntd.com to sign up for our evening newsletter.